February 2013. A historic hotel in the heart of downtown Los Angeles began receiving a series of strange complaints from its guests. Some said the water coming from the faucets looked darker than usual. Others complained that it had an unpleasant odor. Several guests also reported that the water pressure had become unusually weak at first. No one believed these signs had anything to do with a death. Hotel employees inspected the plumbing system. They checked the pumps. They examined the water supply. Eventually, they decided to go up to the roof and inspect the hotel's water tanks. It was supposed to be nothing more than a routine maintenance task. But when an employee opened the lid of one of the tanks, he froze. Inside was the body of a young woman. Her body had been submerged in the water for days. She was Elisa Lam, a 21-year-old Canadian university student. She had been missing for nearly 3 weeks. The discovery quickly became the focus of media attention around the world. But what truly disturbed millions of people was not where Elisa had been found. It was the footage recorded several days before her body was discovered. Security camera footage from inside an elevator, only a few minutes long. There was no sound and no explanation in the video. Elisa enters the elevator looking tense and uneasy. She repeatedly presses several buttons. She hides in the corner as though she is trying to avoid something. Then she suddenly leans out and looks down the hallway. She steps back inside, then walks out again. She raises her hands and makes a series of strange movements. Throughout the entire sequence, the elevator doors do not close. The footage quickly spread across the internet. It received millions of views within a very short period of time. Some believed Elisa was running from someone who had been following her. Others thought she was speaking to an invisible person. Many even claimed that it was one of the most disturbing pieces of footage ever captured by a security camera. Theories involving ghosts, hidden conspiracies, and murder began appearing everywhere. As each year passed, new explanations continued to emerge. The case was eventually featured in documentaries, books, news reports, and thousands of analysis videos around the world. And yet, after all the rumors and speculation, the official investigation reached a very different conclusion. So what really happened to Elisa Lam during the final days of her life? Why did she behave so strangely in the elevator footage? How was she able to reach the hotel roof? And why was her body found inside a water tank that very few people even knew existed? In today's video, we will retrace the complete timeline of the case using investigative records, autopsy findings, witness statements, and publicly available documents. We will separate the facts that have been officially confirmed from the misunderstandings that spread across the internet, and from the questions that, even today, still do not have a complete answer. Who was Elisa Lam? Before becoming the central figure in one of the world's most infamous mysteries, Elisa Lam was simply a 21-year-old young woman. She was born on April 30th, 1991, in Vancouver, British Columbia, Canada. Her parents were immigrants from Hong Kong. They owned a small family restaurant and hoped their daughter would grow up to live a stable and successful life. Those who knew Elisa described her as kind, intelligent, polite. She loved reading, enjoyed photography, and had a deep passion for exploring new places. Like many young people her age, Elisa often shared her life online. She kept a personal blog, posted photos from her travels, wrote about the books she loved, and shared honest reflections about life, the future, and the pressures she was trying to overcome. It wasn't a famous blog. It didn't have millions of readers. It was simply a small corner of the internet where Elisa recorded her thoughts and emotions. But after her death, those journal entries became an important source of information, helping investigators and the public better understand who Elisa Lam really was. Through her writing, it became clear that Elisa was a deeply emotional and thoughtful person. She always tried to see the positive side of life. Yet, she also openly admitted that she struggled with significant emotional ups and downs. According to medical records released during the investigation, Elisa had been diagnosed with bipolar disorder and had experienced episodes of depression. She had been under medical care for years and had been prescribed medication as part of her treatment. This does not mean that every one of Elisa's actions can simply be explained by her mental health, nor does it prove that the mystery surrounding her death has been solved, however. It was an important factor that investigators could not ignore when examining the final days of her life. Friends said Elisa loved traveling. Every trip gave her the feeling of starting over, a chance to escape the pressures of everyday life, and to rediscover a sense of balance. At the beginning of 2013, after months of planning, Elisa decided to take a solo trip along the west coast of the United States. It was a gift she wanted to give herself. A journey to experience new cities, meet new people, and hopefully find peace of mind. Although her parents were understandably worried, they respected their daughter's decision. They asked only one thing, that she stay in touch every day, and Elisa promised she would. No one could have imagined that it would be the last trip of her life. Just a few days after arriving in Los Angeles, Elisa Lam would disappear without a trace. And weeks later, her name would appear in headlines around the world, forever linked to a mysterious video that has fascinated and haunted millions of people for more than a decade. The final journey. In early 2010, Elisa Lam decided to take a solo trip along the west coast of the United States. It wasn't a spontaneous decision. She had planned the trip well in advance. She booked her hotels, prepared her itinerary, and told her family that she would call home every day. Her journey began in San Diego, California. From there, she planned to travel to Los Angeles, continue on to Santa Cruz, and finish her trip in San Francisco before returning to Canada. During the first few days of her journey, everything appeared completely normal. Elisa posted photos online, shared moments from her travels, and continued checking in with her parents every day. There were no signs that she was in any danger. On January 26, 2013, Elisa arrived in Los Angeles. It would become the longest stop of her entire trip. To save money, she chose to stay at the Cecil Hotel. By that time, the Cecil was no longer the glamorous hotel it had been during the early decades of the 20th century. Located in downtown Los Angeles, it offered inexpensive rooms that attracted backpackers, short-term business travelers, and long-term residents alike. However, the neighborhood surrounding the hotel had a reputation for crime and safety concerns. Many visitors, especially international tourists, were unaware of that when making their reservations. At first, Elisa was assigned to a shared hostel-style room with several other guests. According to hotel employees interviewed later, only a few days after checking in, some of her roommates complained about her behavior. Published accounts indicate that Elisa occasionally behaved in ways that made the other guests feel uncomfortable. To avoid further issues, the hotel moved her to a private room after the case became public. This detail attracted considerable attention. Many people on the internet claimed it suggested that Elisa had discovered something suspicious inside the hotel. Others speculated that someone had threatened her. However, to this day there is no evidence supporting those theories. According to the official investigation, the room change was primarily the result of complaints from other guests, not because Elisa had asked for protection or reported that someone was following her. During her stay in Los Angeles, Elisa continued exploring the city. She visited bookstores, bought souvenirs, and chatted with employees wherever she went. A staff member at a bookstore near the hotel later recalled that Elisa was warm and friendly. She spent quite a while browsing through books and even asked for advice on what gifts she should buy to bring home for her family. Nothing about that conversation suggested that she was speaking with someone who would disappear just a few days later. The one thing that reassured Elisa's parents the most was that she kept her promise. Every day, she either called or sent a message home. It had become part of her daily routine until January 31, 2013. That familiar call never came. At first, her parents assumed she was simply busy sightseeing or that her phone battery had died. But as the hours passed without any contact, their concern quickly turned into panic. They immediately contacted the Los Angeles Police Department and requested that a missing person investigation be launched. That was the moment Elisa Lam's disappearance officially began. What no one knew was that during the final hours before she vanished, the hotel's surveillance cameras had captured footage that would become one of the most controversial videos in the history of the internet. And that very footage would leave the world asking one question for more than a decade. What really happened to Elisa Lam during the last moments she was ever seen alive? The Cecil Hotel, a dark history, and the facts behind the legends. As Elisa Lam's name began appearing in headlines around the world, another name quickly became impossible to ignore: the Cecil Hotel. Many people believed that the hotel itself held the answer to the mystery. The internet became flooded with stories about hauntings, rumors of curses, and countless theories claiming that anyone who stayed at the Cecil was destined for tragedy. But to truly understand what happened to Elisa Lam, we first need to separate the hotel's real history from the myths that have grown around it over the decades. The Cecil Hotel opened its doors in 1927. At the time, Los Angeles was experiencing rapid growth. With more than 700 rooms, the hotel was built to accommodate business travelers and tourists. During its early years, the Cecil was considered a respectable and even elegant place to stay. But only a few years after the Great Depression began in 1929, everything started to change. The economy collapsed. Businesses failed. Downtown Los Angeles gradually fell into decline. Just a few blocks from the hotel was an area that would later become known as Skid Row. For decades, Skid Row has been home to a large population of homeless individuals, people struggling with drug addiction, and those living with serious mental health challenges. Crime rates in the neighborhood remained consistently high for many years. As the surrounding area changed, so did the Cecil Hotel. Room rates became increasingly inexpensive. Its guests became far more diverse. Alongside ordinary travelers were long-term residents, people facing financial hardship, and individuals seeking anonymity. According to historical records, the hotel was the site of numerous suicides, accidental deaths, and homicides over the years. Some of those cases made national headlines in the United States. It was this unusual history that gave the Cecil Hotel its infamous reputation. The hotel was also briefly associated with several notorious criminals who stayed there for short periods of time. That detail has been repeated countless times in documentaries and articles exploring the hotel's past. However, that does not mean every tragedy connected to the Cecil was somehow linked. There is no evidence that Elisa Lam knew anyone associated with the hotel's earlier history. Nor did investigators ever conclude that the Cecil's past played any direct role in her death after Elisa's disappearance. The internet began weaving together every incident that had ever occurred at the hotel into one larger narrative. Some called it the Death Hotel. Others claimed it was cursed. Videos exploring paranormal theories attracted tens of millions of views. Gradually, Elisa Lam's name became associated more with urban legends than with the official investigative record. But investigators approached the case very differently. They did not investigate curses. They did not search for supernatural explanations. They searched for evidence. Surveillance footage, witness statements, autopsy findings, and every piece of information that could be supported by facts. That is the approach we will follow throughout this video, because once the rumors are set aside, the greatest mystery of this case is not the history of the Cecil Hotel. It is what happened on the morning of January 31st, 2013, the last day Elisa Lam was ever seen. It began like an ordinary day, but only a few hours later, she disappeared from the hotel without leaving behind a single message. And it wasn't until nearly 2 weeks later that a surveillance video from the hotel's elevator would make the entire world begin asking one haunting question. In those final moments, what was Elisa Lam seeing? The last day, Elisa Lam was seen alive. After spending several days at the Cecil Hotel, there was no indication that Elisa Lam intended to cut her trip short. She was still planning to continue her journey to other cities in California, just as she had originally intended. Her family back in Canada noticed nothing unusual. Throughout the trip, Elisa had kept the promise she made to her parents. Every day, she would call or send a message to let them know she was safe. It had become a routine, a rule she had set for herself. As soon as she arrived somewhere safely, she would check in. So, when January 31st, 2013 came, and no call ever arrived, her parents immediately sensed that something was wrong. At first, they assumed her phone battery had died, or that she was somewhere without a signal. But as the day went on, the silence became increasingly frightening. They kept calling. They sent text messages. They waited for a reply, but none ever came. The family quickly contacted the Los Angeles Police Department and reported Elisa missing. For investigators, a young woman traveling alone who suddenly stopped all communication with her family was not something they could dismiss, especially in a city as large as Los Angeles. As soon as the report was filed, detectives began reconstructing Elisa's movements during her final days. They went to the Cecil Hotel, searched the room where she had been staying, interviewed the front desk staff, spoke with housekeepers, and questioned guests who might have seen her. Hotel employees confirmed that they had interacted with Elisa during the previous few days. No one reported any argument or confrontation. No one heard cries for help, and there was no indication that she had been forced to leave the hotel. Investigators expanded their search. They examined the hotel's public areas, the hallways, the stairwells, the elevators, and the lobby at the same time. Police retraced Elisa's movements throughout the city. One of the most important witnesses was the manager of a bookstore near the hotel. According to the manager's later account, Elisa appeared cheerful and relaxed. She spent time browsing books and shopping for souvenirs. She even asked for advice on what gifts would be best to bring home to her family. She showed no signs of panic. She did not appear frightened, and she never mentioned that anyone was following her. That account caught investigators' attention because it suggested that only a short time before she disappeared, Elisa was still communicating normally with the people around her. However, one question remained unanswered. Where did Elisa go after leaving those locations? There were no further bank transactions, no outgoing phone calls, no text messages. Her cell phone stopped generating any activity. It was as if Elisa had simply vanished from the city over the following days. Police issued missing person alerts across Los Angeles. Elisa's photograph appeared on television news broadcasts, in newspapers, and across social media. Her family flew from Canada to the United States to join the search themselves. They walked through the streets surrounding the hotel, handed out flyers, and hoped that someone would remember seeing Elisa. But as each day passed, the investigation reached a dead end. No new witnesses, no credible tips, no clear evidence. To investigators, it was almost as if the disappearance had no starting point, until they made one crucial decision: to review every available surveillance camera inside the hotel. Among dozens of hours of footage, they discovered a short recording from one of the elevators. At first, no one imagined it would become one of the most famous and controversial surveillance videos in the history of the internet. But those few minutes of footage changed the entire direction of the investigation and captured the last confirmed moments the world would ever see Elisa Lam alive. The elevator video that haunted the world. On February 14th, 2013, after nearly 2 weeks of searching without any major breakthrough, the Los Angeles Police Department released surveillance footage from the Cecil Hotel. Their goal was simple. Perhaps someone would recognize Elisa. or notice a detail important enough to move the investigation forward. No one could have imagined that this video, only a few minutes long, would become one of the most viewed and analyzed pieces of surveillance footage in the history of the internet. Almost immediately after it was released, millions of people began examining it frame by frame, zooming in, slowing it down, adjusting the brightness. Some even used artificial intelligence in an attempt to uncover details invisible to the naked eye. But the more people watched, the more unsettling the footage became. According to the timestamp, Elisa enters the elevator alone. No one appears behind her. The elevator doors remain open. As soon as she steps inside, the first thing she does is walk to the control panel. She repeatedly presses multiple buttons, not just one floor, but what appears to be a whole sequence of different buttons. Then, she backs into the left corner of the elevator, pressing herself against the wall, as though she is trying to avoid being seen by someone outside. A few seconds later, Elisa suddenly leans forward, peers out into the hallway, then quickly pulls back inside. She repeats the same movement several times, each time with apparent caution, as if she is checking whether someone is standing outside or waiting for something to happen. The detail that drew the most attention was that the elevator doors never closed normally. If no one enters or exits after a few seconds, the doors automatically shut. But in this footage, they remain open for an unusually long time. That single detail quickly became the foundation for countless theories. Some people believed someone outside the elevator was holding the doors open. Others thought Elisa was frightened of someone who simply wasn't captured on camera. Some even claimed the surveillance camera had accidentally recorded a supernatural event. But based on the footage alone, there is no evidence supporting any of those conclusions. After continuing to watch the hallway, Elisa steps completely out of the elevator. At that point, only part of her body remains visible on camera. Then comes the moment that left millions of viewers confused: the movements of her hands. Elisa repeatedly rotates her wrists, extends her fingers, moves her hands into several different positions. At times, it looks as though she is gesturing to someone. At other moments, it appears she is carrying on a conversation with someone standing just outside the frame. But the camera captures no one. No shadow, no opening door, no visible movement in the hallway. After several more seconds, Elisa walks away from the elevator. This time, she disappears completely from view, and she is never seen again by that elevator camera. Within minutes of the video's release, the internet exploded. Many insisted Elisa was running from someone who had been following her. Others believed she was showing signs of panic after being threatened. Online communities devoted to the paranormal became convinced that she was reacting to something the camera simply could not record. But investigators reached no such conclusion. To them, the video was only one piece of a much larger puzzle. To understand what had happened, it had to be examined alongside every other piece of evidence, and later analysis would help clarify several important misunderstandings. First, the video released to the public was not the complete original recording. Experts later noted that the footage had been played back at a slower speed than real time. In addition, several brief sections had been edited out before it was released. That led many people to believe the police were hiding something. However, there is no evidence that those edits were intended to alter the events shown in the footage. Investigators explained that the video was released solely to assist in locating a missing person, not to disclose every piece of investigative evidence. Second, there is also a technical explanation for why the elevator doors remained open. According to elevator system specialists, if a passenger presses the door hold button or certain combinations of control buttons, the doors can remain open much longer than normal. In other words, the fact that the doors stayed open does not automatically prove that someone was standing outside holding them. Of course, that still leaves the biggest question unanswered. Why was Elisa behaving that way? Who or what was she looking at? Or was she responding to something that only she could perceive? Those are questions the video itself cannot answer. And that is why, more than a decade later, those few minutes of footage continue to be watched, analyzed, and debated all over the world. But while the debate over the elevator video continued, something else was unfolding elsewhere inside the hotel. Guests began filing repeated complaints about the hotel's water supply. No one knew it at the time, but those complaints would ultimately lead hotel employees to the place where Elisa Lam had remained for days after her disappearance. The search and the horrifying discovery on the hotel roof. While millions of people on the internet debated the elevator footage, Elisa Lam's family wanted only one thing: to find their daughter, whether she was alive or at the very least, to learn what had happened to her. After receiving the missing person report, the Los Angeles Police Department quickly launched a full-scale search. Investigators returned to the Cecil Hotel multiple times. They searched every floor, checked the hallways, inspected the stairwells, and interviewed front desk staff, housekeepers, and security personnel. Everyone was asked the same questions. When was the last time you saw Elisa? Was she with anyone? Did anything unusual happen inside the hotel? But the answers did little to move the investigation forward. No one reported seeing Elisa leave the hotel. No witness could confirm that she had been with another person. And surveillance cameras throughout the building failed to provide a clear picture of her final movements. Police expanded the search beyond the hotel. They distributed missing person flyers, checked local hospitals, contacted the county morgue, searched the streets surrounding the hotel. They even deployed search dogs to assist in the investigation. But as the days passed, every trace of Elisa seemed to disappear. One question has been repeated countless times on the internet ever since. If Elisa was on the hotel's roof, why didn't the police find her immediately? It is also one of the most common misconceptions surrounding the case. Many people believe the police thoroughly searched the entire rooftop, but somehow overlooked her body. In reality, according to publicly released investigative records, officers searched the hotel grounds and accessed portions of the rooftop. However, there is no evidence that they opened and inspected the inside of every rooftop water tank during the initial days of the investigation. That distinction is important. The rooftop water tanks were large metal containers. From the outside, there was no way to know what was inside without opening the lid and looking directly into them. While the investigation remained at a standstill, something that seemed completely unrelated began happening. Guests at the hotel started filing repeated complaints about the water. Some reported unusually low water pressure. Others noticed that the water appeared darker than normal. Several guests even complained that it had a strange smell and an unusual taste. At first, hotel management believed it was simply a mechanical problem with the building's water system. But as the complaints continued to increase, they sent a maintenance worker to the roof to inspect the water tanks. On the morning of February 19, 2013, a maintenance employee climbed onto the roof. He checked the tanks one by one. When he opened the lid of one of them, he was met with an unimaginable sight. Inside the tank was the body of a young woman. It was Elisa Lam. Her body was floating in the same water that had been supplying the hotel's guest rooms. The discovery immediately triggered a full lockdown of the area. Investigators and forensic specialists quickly arrived at the scene. The water supply was shut off completely. Guests were instructed to stay away from the affected areas while the investigation continued. As soon as the news became public, media outlets around the world reported the discovery, and an even larger question emerged. How had Elisa managed to reach the hotel roof? The water tanks sat on elevated platforms. To reach them, a person first had to climb a metal ladder, then open the tank's heavy lid. Only then could someone enter the tank. It was not a place where a person could simply wander by accident. That single detail gave rise to countless new theories. Did Elisa climb there on her own, or did someone take her to the roof? Was she still alive when she entered the water tank, or had she already died beforehand? To the public, the discovery of Elisa's body inside the rooftop water tank transformed an already baffling disappearance into an even greater mystery. But for investigators, this was where the most important phase of the case truly began. Because from this point forward, every theory would have to be tested against forensic evidence. And it was the autopsy that followed that produced conclusions which surprised many people. The autopsy and the forensic evidence. After Elisa Lam's body was removed from the water tank, the entire rooftop of the Cecil Hotel was sealed off. Investigators began collecting every trace of evidence that remained. Each detail was documented carefully, because overlooking even one small piece of evidence could change the entire direction of the investigation. One of the first questions that needed to be answered was Elisa Lam the victim of a homicide, or had her death been an accident? Forensic pathologists conducted an autopsy. The initial findings surprised many people on Elisa's body. There were none of the severe injuries commonly associated with a violent attack. No stab wounds, no gunshot wounds, no signs of strangulation, no major trauma to the head. Aside from a few minor abrasions, there was no clear evidence that she had been involved in a violent struggle before her death. This immediately weakened the theory that Elisa had been murdered through physical violence. The medical examiners also looked for signs of sexual assault. Again, the examination found no evidence that Elisa had been sexually attacked before she died. Toxicology tests were then performed to determine whether she had consumed alcohol, illegal drugs, or other intoxicating substances. The results showed no significant level of alcohol in her system, and no evidence of illegal drug use at a level that could explain her death. However, another detail caught the investigators' attention. According to Elisa's medical records, she had been diagnosed with bipolar disorder and had been prescribed several medications. When those prescriptions were compared with the toxicology results, experts found that the levels of some medications in her body were lower than expected for someone taking them as prescribed. In addition, some of the medications prescribed to Elisa were not detected at all. This was not enough to determine exactly how long she may have stopped taking them, but it did suggest that she might not have been following her treatment plan consistently in the period before her death. This was an important finding for a person living with bipolar disorder. Stopping medication or taking it inconsistently can increase the risk of a manic episode, impaired judgment, or distorted perception. However, the forensic examiners remained cautious. They did not conclude that Elisa's mental health condition directly caused her death. They considered it only one factor that needed to be understood within the wider context of the investigation. After days of examination and analysis, the Los Angeles County Department of Medical Examiner released its conclusion. Elisa Lam's cause of death was determined to be drowning. The manner of death was classified as accidental. That conclusion became highly controversial. To investigators, it was consistent with the forensic evidence they had collected. But to many people following the case, too many questions still remained unanswered. If this was simply an accident, why was Elisa on the hotel roof? Why did she enter the water tank? How was she able to open the lid? And what prevented her from climbing back out? Those questions quickly gave rise to countless theories. Some believed that someone had murdered Elisa and placed her body in the tank. Others suggested that she had been chased, forced onto the roof, or trapped there by accident. Meanwhile, the internet continued creating even more explanations. Some claimed the Cecil Hotel was haunted. Others believed Elisa had seen something in the elevator footage. And many argued that investigators had overlooked crucial evidence. But do those theories truly hold up when compared with the official investigative record? Or were they built on misunderstood details that were repeated and distorted over the years? In the next part, we will examine the most famous theories surrounding Elisa Lam's death. One by one, we will compare each claim with the available evidence to determine what may have happened and what is not supported by the facts at all. Theories that captivated the world, fact or speculation. After the autopsy results were released, many people believed the case had finally been solved. But on the internet, the real debate was only beginning. Even today, more than a decade after Elisa Lam's death, millions of people remain convinced that her death was not simply an accident. Hundreds of analysis videos, thousands of articles, and countless theories have emerged over the years. In this section, we'll examine the most well-known theories one by one. More importantly, we'll compare each of them with what investigators actually found. Theory 1. Elisa Lam was murdered. This is perhaps the theory that has attracted the most support. The argument is straightforward. Many believe Elisa could not have climbed onto the hotel roof by herself, nor could she have entered a water tank standing more than 2 meters above the platform and somehow ended up inside it. Therefore, someone else must have taken her there. At first glance, it sounds plausible, but when compared with the investigative record, the theory faces several major problems. First, the autopsy revealed no injuries consistent with a violent struggle, no signs that Elisa had been restrained, no evidence that she had been overpowered, no indication that she had been strangled or knocked unconscious before entering the water. Second, investigators did not report finding fingerprints or DNA belonging to an unknown suspect at the scene. No witness reported seeing Elisa with another person, and the hotel's surveillance cameras did not capture a stranger accompanying her during the critical period. None of this proves that homicide was impossible, but it does show that to this day, there is no forensic evidence strong enough to conclude that Elisa Lam was the victim of murder. Theory 2. Someone was chasing Elisa in the elevator. This is probably the most famous theory of all. Many viewers believe Elisa repeatedly looked into the hallway because she was hiding from someone. It is true. Her behavior appears tense and uneasy. She repeatedly peers into the hallway, presses herself into the corner, then suddenly steps outside. But the camera never records another person in the hallway. No shadow, no opening door, no direct evidence that anyone was pursuing her. Investigators also never identified a witness who reported seeing a suspicious individual with Elisa as a result. The theory that someone was chasing her remains speculation rather than evidence. Theory 3. Elisa was affected by her mental health condition. Among experts, this is generally considered the explanation most consistent with the available evidence. As discussed earlier, Elisa had been diagnosed with bipolar disorder. Toxicology results indicated that the levels of some prescribed medications in her system were lower than expected, while other prescribed medications were not detected at all. That raised the possibility that she had not been taking her medication as directed in the days before her death, according to psychiatric experts. For some individuals, a manic episode or severe disturbance in perception can lead to feelings of being followed, unsafe decision-making, or behavior that later becomes difficult to explain through ordinary reasoning. It is important to emphasize, not everyone living with bipolar disorder experiences symptoms like these, and the official investigation never concluded with certainty that this is what happened to Elisa. It remains a medically supported hypothesis that is consistent with part of the available evidence. Theory 4. The Cecil Hotel was haunted. This has become one of the most popular theories on YouTube and paranormal forums. It is mainly based on 2 ideas: the hotel's long history of deaths and Elisa's unusual movements in the elevator footage. However, no investigative evidence supports the existence of any supernatural element in this case. Investigators did not consider this explanation, nor was it mentioned in the forensic findings. It is true that many tragic events occurred at the Cecil Hotel over the decades, but that alone does not prove that every death connected to the hotel shared the same cause. Theory 5. Some questions may never be answered. This may be the most reasonable conclusion of all, because even if we accept the official finding that Elisa accidentally drowned, several important questions remain unanswered. What made Elisa go to the hotel roof? What happened during the period between the elevator footage and her arrival at the water tank? Why did no one report seeing her during that time? And in the final moments of her life, what was she experiencing? Perhaps those questions will never be answered completely, because the most important witness was Elisa Lam herself, and she is no longer here to tell us what happened. Maybe that is why this case continues to fascinate people more than a decade later, not because of ghost stories, not because of conspiracy theories, but because the gap between what has been proven and what remains unknown is still wide enough to leave room for questions. In the final part of this video, we'll look back at the entire case, review what has been firmly established, what remains open to debate, and why the death of Elisa Lam is still regarded as one of the most enduring mysteries of the 21st century. Conclusion: when the truth isn't enough to erase the mystery. More than a decade has passed. The Cecil Hotel has changed its name. Parts of the building have been renovated. New guests have come and gone. But one name continues to be mentioned whenever people talk about this place: Elisa Lam. For investigators, the case was closed years ago. The official conclusion has never changed. The cause of death was determined to be drowning. The manner of death was classified as accidental. No evidence was found that Elisa had been murdered. There was no suspect, no indication of a deliberate attack. Those conclusions were reached after a thorough investigation, a complete autopsy, and an extensive review of all the available evidence. However, there is one reality that even investigators cannot change. Not every question can be answered. We know that Elisa stepped into the elevator, but we do not know exactly what was going through her mind at that moment. We know that she was found inside a rooftop water tank, but no one can say with certainty what happened during the final moments of her life. We know the findings of the autopsy, but we cannot reconstruct every event that led to that outcome. It is those unanswered gaps that have given rise to countless theories. Some are reasonable, some are based on misunderstandings, and others were created simply to attract attention. Unfortunately, sensational stories often spread much faster than the official investigative record. The elevator video is perhaps the clearest example. For some people, it is evidence of an unseen force. For others, it suggests a crime that was somehow covered up. But from the perspective of a criminal investigation, it is simply a piece of surveillance footage, capturing the last confirmed moments Elisa appeared on camera. It raises many questions, but by itself, it does not prove any particular theory. Perhaps the saddest part of this entire story is that Elisa Lam herself is sometimes overshadowed by the endless debate surrounding her death. Behind that famous elevator video, there is more than just a mystery. There was the life of a 21-year-old young woman, a daughter, a friend, a university student who was trying to experience more of the world. A journey that began with hope, but ended in a tragedy that shocked people across the globe. Even today, Elisa Lam's case continues to be explored in documentaries, podcasts, and true crime channels around the world. Not because a new suspect has emerged, and not because the investigation has been reopened, but because it serves as a reminder that, even in an age of surveillance cameras, advanced forensic science, and sophisticated investigative techniques, there are still cases in which every moment can never be fully reconstructed. Some questions may always remain theories, and some gaps in the story may never be filled. Perhaps the most important lesson is not to force every unanswered detail into a conspiracy, but to respect what the evidence actually shows, while also recognizing that sometimes even the truth has its limits.